Blessed are you, O Lord, teach me your statutes.
How y'all doing? Good. My name is John Hinson. I've actually seen some of you at various Orthodox events, Pan-Orthodox, different things. I probably don't remember names very well, so except for Scott, David in the back. It's good to be here, and I hope that we can. I want to kind of do some discussion as we talk. Like I said, my name is John Hinson. I am a licensed counselor, licensed professional counselor here in Arizona. Also, I teach behavioral health and psychology classes over at Arizona Christian University over in Glendale, which is a small evangelical college over in Glendale at Greenway and 59th Street. So, and I attend St. Ignatius Church over in Mesa. So that's kind of, you've been in and out of there a few times. I might have seen some of you there actually. Over there, and Father James is the priest over there. So it's good to be here, and I was asked to speak about a couple of topics. I think they'll actually follow up well from Father Timothy's talk earlier, so I'm really happy about that. So I've been Orthodox since 2011, or I became a catechumen in 2010. Came in through Chrismation in 2011. And one of the reasons I came in, and it actually ties in a little bit to this, was there was a point in my spiritual journey before I became Orthodox, when I was still in Protestant Reformed world, and going to seminary, studied a little bit, studied counseling, and actually, I found out that the more I was studying in that academic Protestant setting, the less content I was becoming. And I wasn't really sure why that was. And so I did spend several years post-seminary just kind of exploring what to do. Was feeling, pretty discontent. Started to question, started to go into a little bit of an agnostic phase, kind of did some stopping and starting on going to different Protestant churches here in Phoenix, and just felt generally discontent. One of the things that had happened in my life is that prior to I'll try to keep in frame here, as I was in seminary, a lot of my own personal experiences, a lot of my life experiences, trauma, things from the past were coming up. And I was dealing with them, going to counseling, doing a lot of different things, but it was never like, okay, how does my faith in Christ really apply? How does it really apply here? And how do I make it apply? And so I was reading various kind of some Buddhist Taoist stuff, just enough to be dangerous in terms of not reading it, but not really knowing what I was talking about. Went through that phase for a long time, and really kind of went into this kind of Buddhist phase where I was like, everything seems unknowable. And one day, I don't even know what I put in the Google search. I put something to the effect of the unknowability of God. And Orthodox stuff started trickling in to my Google, and that was a few years before I even decided to go to an Orthodox church. I looked at it, sounded interesting, shut the computer up. Would go back to it every now and then, sounded interesting. I had been involved in various churches, including an Anglican church, which was very the Anglican church I was going to is almost Catholic in terms of the liturgy. But all of that to say, I was off and on, just kind of exploring, had been through a stage where I had, like I say, reading things from Eastern thought. And I started attending Orthodox services, I guess in 2009, 2 or 3 times, but it was so different. It was so the terminology I would have used then, so exotic and so different that after 2 or 3 times I ran back to my Anglican church and this feels more normal. I did that for about a year and then decided, I needed to really make a decision. So I had attended Catholic churches along the way and finally just settled into coming into the Orthodox Church. Even with a lot of doubt, let me just say that, even with a lot of spiritual doubt, just coming in, just doing it. And questions have been answered over the years, not all questions at one time, but questions have been answered over the years in terms of my experience in Orthodoxy. What I'm hoping to do today is talk a little bit about mental health, as well as how we look at that in terms of our Orthodox faith. And I'm going to bring a few books along the way and to kind of help you to see that. But in terms of our mental health system today, and I'm not going to talk a lot about secular system other than to just do a little bit of contrast and to help us kind of get a little bit our bearings here. One of the things that I think is happening in the current day, when we look at people in their 20s, 30s, your age group, we see this increase in suicide. And you've all heard about it. You might know people that have taken their lives, which is horrible. And we see this increase. And a lot of times we're looking, culturally at least, for the mental health profession to kind of answer the question. How can, the term is, okay, we need to get people to counseling, we need to get them into counseling, and sometimes we do. But I do think there's another issue that I don't think the secular mental health counseling world can really speak to, is real reasons why I believe a lot of people in your age group are committing suicide, and I think it has to do with lack of purpose and meaning in life. A lack of sense of having purpose, a sense of having meaning in your life. And I think that's significant when we look at this issue. One of the books that I'll mention here that was not by an Orthodox writer, but I really liked because it helped frame my ideas and then kind of think about them through an Orthodox lens, was a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if any of you have ever heard about that or not. I really liked that because I think he said very clearly, some people that commit suicide or have other problems, other emotional problems, it's happening because of a lack of meaning, lack of purpose. And in his view, meaning and purpose were central to who we are as people, as humans. We're going to take that a little further in just a second, but who we are as human beings. We had to have a sense of purpose and meaning to have that. I think he was right on that. I think he was. And I don't think, having been around the secular mental health field for a few years, I'm going to get my notes back up here. Having been around the secular mental health field for several years now, I think one of the things that we don't do, the secular field isn't able or equipped to do, is speak to purpose and meaning in life. I think it's equipped to speak to trauma, to life's difficulties, but I don't think it's really designed to speak to a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And I want to kind of follow that route just a little bit this morning for a few minutes, we have together, and just kind of get your perspective on it. Let me ask you this, though. Let me just run this by you before we go any further. The idea of the lack of meaning and purpose in your generation leading to more suicide, do you think that's true based on what you're seeing among your friends? You think that's probably a true thing?
Well,
yes, sir.
I'll add an additional element to that, which is there's the absence, which is I can't find meaning, and then there's the deliberate tearing down. And I see deliberate tearing down becoming an increasing share of that pie, where if someone has meaning or goodness, it's always got to be, you don't deserve it, you didn't earn it, you shouldn't do that, something like that.
Yeah, I think the tearing down is a real thing that's going on, and you even see people deconstructing their faith. You'll see that online too. You don't see that as much in Orthodox circles, but you definitely are seeing it in a lot of, among a lot of Protestant evangelicals, where they're doing this deconstructing of faith. I haven't seen it as much in Orthodoxy, but I don't know if there are groups out there or not. Yes?
I've actually known a couple people who had great purpose in life who still committed suicide. I think because in the way the world works currently, even if you have great purpose and you strive towards that and you work extremely hard, I think you have to work so hard to make a difference and to see that difference ripple out in the world sometimes that it burns people out almost.
Yeah. There's that never being enough.
Yeah.
Kind of sense of thing going on. I think that's a part of it. And I definitely think, the lack of purpose and meaning not only obviously leads to suicide, but more drastically could lead to other things, addictions being one of them, as a way of just coping with that. I see that among some folks that I know, friends of mine in their 30s, where they just use the alcohol and the drugs to cover this lack of significant meaning in their life. And so that's a real point that we want to look at and consider as you're talking to many of your friends out there. One of the things that I think is helpful for us to begin to look at is how do we not only respond to that with other people, but how do we respond to that with ourselves? Within our Orthodox faith, how do we respond to that within ourselves, and how do we move forward? And the topic I had was body and soul, and the Eucharistic life, body and soul. And I want to just look at a couple of areas that we could explore here. One of the things I made a quick note here. In truth, what we may be experiencing are mental health issues that are more, as I would say, existential issues or issues for meaning than actual related mental health issues. So I think that's just something for us to keep in mind, that sometimes when people are experiencing addiction or even depression or even anxiety, there's a deep sense of just lack of purpose and meaning that's going on for folks. And I think it's helpful when you see your friends in those situations. I think there is that's happening more and more. A couple things I want to just kind of cover here as we go through this in terms of our own faith, our own day-to-day life in the church, how we can move forward and speak to some of this. I would say this. Let me speak to this a little bit. There is a tendency when we move into the Orthodox Church, and men do this more than women. I'll just go ahead and say this, a lot more. Some of you may know what I'm getting ready to say. When we're looking at how our faith works, and you get excited about coming into Orthodoxy, and you want to read 3,000 books before Tuesday, that is not going to heal you. I'm not saying those books are bad. I brought like 4 or 5 of them here just to refer to, but that's not going to heal you. That's because that's not really the mind of Orthodoxy. You're not just replacing theological points A, B, and C with theological points D, E, and F. I mean, there are different theological points, but it goes much deeper than that. It's much more profound than that. And hopefully you're beginning to get that as you listen to people, as you listen to your priest, as you listen to other people that have been in the faith a lot longer than you have, which is really important, and not listening to as much the internet. I say that in every talk. I'm just going to say it in every talk that I'm ever invited to do in an Orthodox setting. Because it's a real issue, because you start to believe it. You're wanting to take in all this knowledge. And there's a tendency to believe the knowledge is going to heal me. The knowledge is going to increase my faith. And knowledge is good. There's priests here that have been to seminary, so I know knowledge is good. But the heart of it is not just about changing what's between the ears here. It's really not. And that's not going to be the healing ingredient to change you, is what's between the ears here. There have been saints that barely knew how to read, or didn't know how to read at all. But that didn't keep them from becoming saintly. And I just want to say that that's not my main topic. And I know a few months ago I was at a group sponsored here, and I kind of went off on that too. And if I ever get invited back again, I'll probably just make that plug every time. So keep us grounded. Keep us grounded in the fact that what we're trying to attain in our own healing is to develop the mind of the church. What we're trying to obtain is to develop the mind of the church. And that takes time. And it takes more than 5 minutes. It takes more than the period between the time you become a catechumen and the time you're chrismated. It takes longer than that. It takes years. And so our healing journey in Orthodoxy takes years. And that's okay. That's okay. I think it's design. I think that's the design. I really do. I think that's what it's supposed to be. That we're not going to be healed in 5 minutes. Before I go on, I just kind of said a whole lot. Does anybody want to add to that or say anything? Give you a minute or two on that one.
What did you mean by the mind of the church?
That we would just, as we would, we would develop the ascetical mind of the church, that we would develop what the church fathers have attained. Not that we will do that, not we will attain what they attain, or the saints, but the saints, while they were reading, and while some of them might have been reading and studying, they were praying. They were they were fasting. They were saying the Jesus prayer. They were in the sacramental life of the church. Really in the sacramental life of the church, as a part of their being. Sometimes, how many of you are converts? All right. How many of you grew up in church? Okay. That's always a minority in these groups these days. That's always a minority. And that's great. It's great to have converts. But understand that to really kind of develop a mind of the sacramental life of the church, the importance of that, it takes time. And when I came in 10 or 12 years ago, I thought it was really good and I liked it, but I didn't really understand that, this is going to take, I didn't really have the sense that this takes time to get used to. This takes time. I'm wrapping my life around the Eucharist and around confession, and around fasting, and around the Jesus prayer. All of these things take time, and that's kind of what I mean is we kind of develop that, and around the feast, that we develop our life around Orthodoxy. Does that make sense? Where sometimes, most. Again, it's different having two priests here, but most priests are going to say, a lot of priests are going to say, if you want to know about theology of the church, come to Divine Liturgy. Experience it in here. Experience the saints. Experience the beauty of the Eucharist within the liturgy. All of that, if you want to come. And that is really where you learn. As every Holy Week, when we go through all the prayers of Holy Week, I learn something different and new every time. Every time. And so that's kind of what I mean about developing the mind of the church. Developing the mind of the church. That's more of what I mean, is really getting into the rhythm of it in your life, putting your life in that rhythm. So, as we look here, I want to go over a couple of different things This first book, I want to just take a couple of quotes from: bread, water, wine, and oil, and just a couple of things here that he's talking about in relation to our own healing. We need the healing of the church. We need the healing of the church. My own experience and my own healing was that, and I'm saying this as a therapist, therapy could take me so far. Talking about things could take me so far. Being in support groups could take me so far. But what I needed was the Eucharist. What I needed was confession. What I needed was, unction services once a year that we do at Holy Week. Those were true, that's true healing. That's true healing. And I realized, one of the things that happened in my own journey was I had stirred up a whole bunch of emotions. I had done some therapeutic work, but there was still something missing. And I went through a decade where there was that something missing. And then coming into, I can't say that day one in Orthodoxy, it's here, I got it right now. But what I can say is I kept coming back to the Eucharist. And that was a healing presence. I'm going to start over here, but let me switch over here. This book called Orthodox Psychotherapy, which there's so many quotes in here. If I were to give you the ones I really like, we'd be here till 3 o'clock, just sitting here with them. But one of the things that in this book that's profound is when he talks about the sacraments. I have to look it up, but when he talks about the sacraments, he says there's two things. The sacraments are not magic and they're not mechanical. So in other words, you shouldn't come to the sacrament. Yes, there's a mystery, but you shouldn't approach the sacrament as it's like this magic thing. We're not on Magic Island. You shouldn't approach it like we're on this. It's a magical thing, or it's an instant cure, or it's a cure-all, or those kinds of things. And you might still, in addition to going to the Eucharist, you may still need to go to counseling and therapy and all those things, talk to your priest, all of that is important. The other side that he brought up in here was it shouldn't be mechanical either. It shouldn't just be, okay, I'm checking off the list, I'm going to be at liturgy on Sunday, I'm going to go to confession during the penitential seasons, all 4 of them, and next year there's only 3 of them because Pascha's later, and so there's only 3 next year. So I'll go to confession. I'll do that. I'll check that off, and I'll get very mechanical about it. I'll do the minimum for confession. I'll be at liturgy every Sunday, and then you just kind of like you're checking off the list, and that's not what we want either. That's not what we want either. We're not looking for that we're not looking for either one of those. We're looking that you would develop a life, or I would hope that you would develop a life within the church, and the Eucharist would become a part of that. On Sundays, on feast days, on any other day that your parish is offering the liturgy. Confession would become a regular part of your life. Sometimes people say, well, I don't know what to confess when I go to confession. I'm getting into probably the priestly areas here, but I know for me, when I think about my thought life for about 10 minutes, I've got a lot I can go on there. If I think of it for about an hour, I got a whole lot I can go on. I can spend a lot of time in confession. So I know that for me, that is a really important thing in getting into the life of the church and getting into the Eucharistic rhythm of the church, and going to confession when I need to, which is, I try to go once a month or so, but going when I need to, and being in that place of humbling myself. I think the other aspect of the Eucharistic, the sacramental life is humbling ourselves, is the humility to be in there. So is that something that you've been able to learn since you've been in the church, or is that something that I kind of want to, is there any insights you brought in that you have as you've come in? I'm just curious. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I kind of learned in a way of like preparing for the Eucharist as well. It's like you said, like you go to confession, you humble yourself. So when we come to the Eucharist with our hearts prepared, instead of just taking it like mechanically, it actually gives off more grace. It's more beneficial for us rather than just taking it.
Yes, that's important. Anybody else? Any thoughts? I think those are all important things to consider when we look at it in developing the habits of the church. And this is especially important for converts, because I know when I was glad to be Orthodox, but I didn't really appreciate being Orthodox, if that makes sense. I didn't appreciate what it all meant to be there. And I also, what I gradually began to get was that this was a healing reality going on in my own life. And I didn't really understand why. I still don't fully. There's a mystery going on that we don't fully ever understand. There's a true mystery that we don't ever understand. But in that mystery, I knew there was a healing going on. In confession, I knew there was a healing going on. Through fasting, I knew there was a healing going on. So it was really bringing myself into kind of deeper into the life and the mind of the church that really assist in our mental health. I really believe that. That doesn't mean we don't need to go. You might need to go counseling every now and then. If you have a counselor right now, don't quit. If you're on antidepressants or anything for anxiety or depression, I'm not giving you permission to quit that. You go to your doctor. He knows how to work with you on those issues. But what I am saying is, the Eucharistic life, the sacramental life, can impact our mental health. Can impact our mental health, which is also our spiritual health. Can impact that very, very powerfully. I just want to kind of give you that a little bit. One of the things that, has anybody here read For the Life of the World? This was gold mine for me. I'm just looking, and I only just scanned it yesterday, thinking about today's talk, and it was just like it's gold. I would very, very much encourage you to read it, and read it slowly and thoughtfully. Don't fly through it. Read it slowly and thoughtfully, because it can be very meditative. But the beauty of this is when he says in the first chapter and then in the second, man is hungry. Humans are hungry. And we are hungry for God. That's our hunger. Now, I know from working and being a counselor for 20 some years, that hunger for God can get met through a lot of different things. Addictions, sexual promiscuity, various, making lots of money, whatever. It can get met. That hunger is real, and it can get met in a lot of different ways if it's not met in the right way. But our hunger is toward God. Now, and we have to focus on that. And having worked with addictions, that was one of the areas I focused a lot on in my counseling process. That's a huge one. We have to look at that, because people use addiction to cover a lot of things in their life. But there is a hunger here. And then we all know this, but it's good to be reminded of it. When he says, when you eat food, which you're going to eat lunch after this, when you eat food, regular food, it's dead. Like the meat is dead. The cow is dead. The chicken is dead. The pig is dead. So what you're eating is dead. It'll give you some nutrients, but limited, because it's not gonna, it's been pulled off the vine. It's dead. So it's not gonna it just satisfies your body for a while. What do we believe about the Eucharist when we approach? What do we believe? Yes.
It's a consuming fire.
It's consuming fire. Yes.
It's the living body and blood of Christ.
Thank you. It's the living body and blood of Christ. So what we're taking into our bodies is life. We're taking life into our bodies. And I think sometimes we approach mechanically and forget, I'm here, I'm taking the Eucharist, I'm doing my thing or whatever, and we forget we're taking life into us. Now, when you eat at lunchtime, you're taking nutrients for your body, but what you're eating is dead. But when we approach the Eucharist, what you're taking in is it's alive. And it's the opposite of what happened in the Garden of Eden, where they were taking in death. It was life. They're taking in life. So I was, there are many things, there are many other things, there are many other diamonds in this book that I would encourage you to sift out. But that was one of the big ones that really hit me when I first read it years ago, and even when I was reviewing it for this talk, is that, we are taking in life. And I think having a sacramental life is really not only just doing it, but of being aware of that reality. So I'm hoping that'll be something you can look at as well. Any thoughts around that one? That's a big one. Good. Yes.
Sort of related to that, two comments. One is a funny pun with that as a sourdough baker. It's funny to hear that because bread and wine are not, it's like they're dead technically, but they're fermented, right? So they were actually, like both of those being fermented foods were like call it resurrected into something else. So I always found that was something beautiful about the Eucharist. But while I was catechumen, and then especially after I got baptized, charismated, I found that like the times that I would go home, or like the times that I would get away from my parish, which was in Prescott, the longer I stayed away from it, I could start to feel like physically almost sick from it, like almost like a decay. It was really weird. Well, in that case, it was because I was going home and not going to church, because there aren't really many churches up where I'm from. So it was kind of weird to feel to have the contrast and feel it in real time. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I know that when I go back to see family in North Carolina, and I might miss a Sunday because there aren't any Orthodox churches around there, and just several other factors. I know I'm missing something. There's something I feel like I'm missing. It's not just food. There's a literal sense of, I can feel the lack of I almost sense the lack of presence when you're not there. Yeah, you do. But yet that's a good thing, because it makes us more eager to come back. It makes us more hungry. And that's not a bad thing for us to be a little more hungry in that. A couple of things here. Time is rapidly running out here, but I'm going to get you out of here by noontime. One of the things that we look at is, sometimes, so many times, in particularly in having been trained in mental health in Western culture, we're looking at how you resolve thoughts and feelings, and that becomes kind of the Sometimes people will refer to, when people get into their emotions, that you're getting into your soul and all that. And I've heard that among therapists and even among clients. And I was always kind of bothered a little bit by that. While I think it's true, you're feeling your emotions. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But I was always bothered by it. I was like, well, I think there's more to the soul than this. I think there's a lot more to the soul than this. And coming into Orthodoxy and really kind of beginning to understand a little more about image of God, the nous, those parts of us, those deeper parts of the soul that we as Orthodox Christians want to purify. We want to purify ourselves. We want to purify those, the image within us. We want that to be a purified thing in our lives. I think that was a whole different mindset for me, rather than just having my emotions resolved and feeling like I feel better emotionally, so I'm better. But I don't know that I felt like anything was being poured back into my soul in that way, like the Eucharist, like you're saying. But also, I would say that there was a sense in where, in becoming and understanding the therapeutic thing of Orthodoxy is understanding it is about purification. It's about us purifying ourselves. And some of us grew up in backgrounds where, if you grew up in some Protestant evangelical background like I did, it's like, okay, you're a Christian, you're good. You're saved, you're good. Not everybody didn't grow up in that kind of background. But how many of you kind of did? I'm curious. Yeah, you kind of have that, you're good, you're saved. And, but it's like that struggle to purify is a good struggle. It's a good struggle to be in. To struggle during Lent, when we're fasting, is a good struggle. Even on the days that you get angry. Because I know if you really follow the Lenten schedule, there's just times when you get frustrated. Anybody have that? Please tell me I'm not the only one. So you get frustrated because you're getting frustrated, and some of that's working the passions out because you're dealing with the passions. And it's like you're dealing with, I want to eat what I want to eat. And you're halfway through the thing, and you go, I want to eat a burger. And you're questioning, it's like, why am I doing this? But that's a good struggle. It lets you know where you are, and I think it lets you know that something's going on that's really good. Even though it is a struggle. It is a struggle to purify ourselves and to walk in the process. One of the things we have to, I would say, contend with, Orthodoxy speaks to it, and I think we see it in the world. One of the things that people are fragmented. In other words, I see it in mental health a lot. People come in, they're depressed, they have anxiety, more severe in schizophrenia, things like that. Less severe would be the things we deal with. One of the things that with the fall and living in a sinful world and in the consequences of sin and the consequences of ancestral sin of generations back is we are fragmented. We live fragmented lives. All of us do. And what the church does through the sacramental life of the church, through submitting our bodies and our souls to Christ, we're coming more to wholeness. We're coming more. And when I say we're coming, because we're not whole. None of us are whole. We still got to put the fragments. We still got to work on some of our fragments in different ways. Whether that's all of that. It could be sacramental. It could be mental health. It could be, a medication and what is it. We gotta work on the fragments. But the church speaks to that. The sacramental life of the church speaks to that. And I just wanna give you that hope that it really does. It truly speaks to that as you stay in it, as you continue to grow and develop a heart and the mind of an Orthodox Christian. It really does. And that may take years. I'm sure that Father Timothy would say it does take years sometimes to walk through all of that. But we are fragmented, and we're coming to the church, to the Eucharist, to the confession for healing. That's a big difference than God is angry with you and you have to escape his anger. That's a little different. That's a lot different. It's a lot different. That God desires our healing, and the church is a place of therapy, or the therapeutic. The church is a place of therapy. It's therapeutic. Well, that was another big draw to Orthodoxy. Any thoughts on that? Yes, ma'am.
Wondering how ancestral sin would affect this.
Well, it could, and what I mean by ancestral sin is I mean the sin from just one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. That's what I mean.
Okay.
I don't mean it like in a curse way,
Okay.
and that term gets used a lot in different settings, but I mean primarily is that sin is passed down from generation to generation. I can look at the impact, particularly in my father's family, back to my great-grandfather, which would be going back a long way, and I can just see the impact and how it's impacted me. That would be, it's good to do that sometimes, but just like, okay, we have the place of healing here.
Yeah.
By the way, yes.
You were talking about kind of emotions and kind of expressing them. I know that's something that I kind of struggle with. It's just, I can see it with my daughter where it's like she gets upset because she wants something, and to me I don't go, oh, that's a sin. But if I'm upset about something, I'm like, that's a sin, I better not do that. And I can be too harsh on myself with that. But then also it's like, well, if I'm getting mad and raising my voice, obviously that's not good. So that's just something that, I don't know, so it's often hard to parse kind of what to do with emotions, when is it a sin, or
Yeah, that's a lot to parse. I don't want to oversimplify it, but one of the first things I think about is Lord have mercy, and Jesus prayer, and I really do. I think about Lord have mercy, and really developing that sense of that's a time to go to the Jesus prayer, to really go to that place. It's also a time to explore what's going on in my home life. It might even be a time to explore confession. I really, as a therapist, it's great to talk to people. It's great for them to tell me about their lives, and I value that a lot. But that's not the same as really going to confession, having a spiritual father that can guide that process for you. That's a big one. That would be one I think would be helpful to do. And then sometimes it's like, okay, you have to communicate with your wife more about that too, and let her speak into your life about that as well. So, as your wife is sitting right beside you. All of those things. I do think our emotional lives are important, and understanding our emotions are important, and having people we can talk to about it are important. Whether that's a counselor, whether it's a spiritual father, whether it's your priest, having people you can talk to about the anger is important. But the thing is, what comes from the anger? What are the actions that come from the anger? And that's the work could be worked out in confession. So, couple of things here. I think I'm almost done here. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a cousin of mine, and we're always talking about like trauma and God and things like that. And he's been to therapy and things like that. And he was telling me the other day that he believes that therapy has helped him a lot, and that I should go take it. And I told him, well, in all reality, when I talk to a priest, when I go to a professional, I find that as my therapy. And he was telling me that he didn't believe that was right, and that I should see a person that was qualified to be a therapist and things like that. I was trying to talk to him, give him some points, but he just didn't take it.
Well, there are certain things that therapists are trained to do in terms of dealing with trauma, dealing with things that they have a certain training in that may be needed, for that. I know people, Orthodox Christians that go, they rely on the sacramental life of the church, and they go to therapy as well. I do think we have to be careful sometimes in terms of secular mental health people that we go to. You might want to go, consider. I would say go find someone that is a Christian to go to, because of just the secular nature of things that have a similar worldview.
It's just one therapist that he had told him to do not good things, and when he was telling me what the therapist was telling him, I was like, dude, don't do that.
Yeah, and that's why you have to be wise if you go into counseling. If you decide you need counseling, you should find someone that, in my opinion, that's a Christian, and particularly has your worldview. And I'm a little more strict on that than I would have been a few years ago, but the field has changed a lot, and I've been around a lot of secular therapists, so I would say find someone that you feel like fits with what you believe. And you're on their page, they're on your page. Yes, sir.
So just to help them, I was a graduate researcher, and I knew a lot of psychologists work closely. Psychology has an extreme replicability crisis, so it's not clear what types of progress is being made, if any, in a lot of areas. It's very, very ideological and dogmatic, where you can't question whatever the mainstream belief is. And probably worst of all, it's pumped very full of pharmaceutical money, so there's a lot of doctors who are listening for keywords so they can put you on something they can charge you with. And they have an incentive, remember, they're not paid by the cure, they're paid by the hour. So they have an incentive to not cure you.
Yeah. And I have to say, I ran into a psychiatrist last week, ran into two of them. They're working together, and they're actually not just using medication, they're using natural supplements and things like that as well. And they actually do therapy, and I was like, man, this is unusual. And I mean unusual in a good way, that they are doing something different than the normal field is doing. And so that was really, you'll find those, but you have to be careful. You want to find people that, if you're going to counseling, that fit, a Christian that fits more your point of view, where they're coming from. I had a guy one time, years ago in counseling, he told me, he wanted me to know, he had a lot of trauma from his church experience, a lot. He had been spiritually abused by Christians. It was bad. He did not want to talk about God in the session. He did not want to talk about God at all. But he wanted to know that I was a Christian. He wanted to know that I was on his page and believed the same things he believed, even though he just wasn't able to talk about God. That was important to him, to do that. So that can be helpful. But now I also say, understanding that the Eucharistic life of the church is a big part of that healing process. And, being open with your priest and letting him know about these things is also really important as well. So I think, yes, last question, because I think I've exceeded my time.
Just for people who are looking for what you described, somebody who brings in a lot of different components to their practice. For practitioners like that, it's often, you want to look for somebody Christian, but also somebody who does integrative medicine. That's where you're incorporating a lot of different, counseling, but we also focus on exercise and nutrition instead of pharmaceuticals at people. That's an emerging field, but there are a lot of people in the valley that do that kind of work, and it's very good.
good.
To give it a name so people can look for it.
I went back and forth between a few books today, so these are the books I would really recommend. For the Life of the World is a gold mine of wisdom. The other one that I found helpful was Orthodox Psychotherapy, and the other one that I did a little bit of quote as I was preparing this was Bread, Water, Wine, and Oil. I found that one helpful too. So if you want to just come up and scan them or take a picture of them so you can go order them on Amazon and have them in 2 days, I'll leave them up here for just a minute or two so you can have that. I think I exceeded my time.
The choir of the saints has found the fountain of life and the door of paradise. May I also find the way through repentance. I am the sheep that was lost. Call me up to you, O Savior, and save me.